Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Medha Parlikar. She's the CTO and co-founder at CasperLabs. Medha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing at CasperLabs is really innovative and cool. But maybe before we get into all that stuff, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Oh, sure. I grew up in Canada, actually, in the province of Ontario.
Very cool. I'm actually Canadian as well. I live in Alberta. So very cool.
Nice. Very nice.
So walk me through, you went to university. What did you take and why?
Oh, gosh. So, for those that don't know, I'm of Indian descent. My parents were first generation Indians that settled in Canada when they immigrated from India. And like a good Indian girl, I was expected to go to medical school. So when I went to college, I got my undergraduate bachelor's degree in biology with an intent, originally with an eye to go into medical school. I had a shift in my life and decided that that was not the career that I wanted to go into, in my early 20s.
Okay. So did you ever have any desire to be a doctor, or it was just kind of like, well, this is what my parents kind of expected me?
When I was really young, I had a desire to be a doctor, but I feel like my motivations were not grounded in the reality of what, being a physician actually meant. And as I grew older, I knew that I wanted to have a different quality of life. And medicine was transforming during that time. And it became evident to me pretty early on that lifestyle wasn't what I wanted. I would probably overcommit myself at the expense of far too many other things in my life to the profession. So I opted out.
Got you. Okay. So you mentioned you had a career kind of change in your early 20s. How did that come about, and what did you get passionate about then?
So it was interesting, after I moved to San Diego, so I've lived in San Diego for about 30 years, don't live there anymore. But, when I moved to San Diego, it was because I met my husband and got married at a very young age. And obviously I had to pay the bills. So I just got a job. And at that job, I rapidly became the internal IT support. And it was at that time that the IT professional in there told me that I should go back to school, and because I was good at this. He's like, "Kid, you're pretty good at this. You should either consider a career." And so then I went back to school to get trained as a software developer, and that's when I got my first job actually writing code at Jostens Learning. I didn't realize it at the time, but I actually I was one of those outliers. I had been working with computers since I was 12 years old, building them in my dad's basement and writing and debugging programs in MS-DOS. I didn't want to follow in my dad's footsteps. He was a structural engineer. And even though he recommended engineering school for me, it really wasn't something that I wanted to do because I had a very clear, I had a picture of what engineering was at that time. So I didn't pursue electrical engineering. Sometimes I pause at where I would have been if I had done that instead of going to medical school. But I had a lot of expertise in technology, but I came by it not through formal education at that point in time, but really by hands-on, working with it hands-on at a very young age.
Interesting. I actually think just having that experience and that curiosity and just basically messing around with computers at that age, it's almost like it helps you so much in your future, no matter kind of where you end up. And I know a few people that I put myself in that boat where you just kind of like when you fall into something and it becomes your passion later on and your career, it's like so valuable. Hey?
It absolutely is. It literally is what the book Outliers talks about. And it was very late in my life that I actually connected the dots and realized that I was an outlier because I really didn't know why I understood so much about how computers worked, but I had been building them. By the time I was 22, I'd already been working with them for 10 years. I was the only kid in my high school with a personal computer on my desk. I was the only kid in my college dorm with a computer and a printer. I actually had a laser printer back in 1987. Yeah, my dad made sure I had that, right?
That's
so
awesome.
It's very cool. So I was working with, software and word processing way before anybody else was, and I just knew how these things worked. And so it really it became very apparent much later to me in life that was why, because I started asking the same question you are. I was like, how did I wind up in this amazing industry, and that's really what it was. It was because I just learned about it hands-on at a very early age.
Very cool. So walk us through your career, maybe some highlights along the way up until coming up with the idea and co-founding CasperLabs.
Yeah, so I started writing code around Y2K, 1997, 1998 at Jostens Learning. Yeah, I was writing cross-platform code. I wrote in Pascal, and then I did some work in Java and then C, C++. And then after that, I realized I didn't actually love code construction as much as I loved doing integration testing and actual quality control. And so then I pivoted, and this was around the .com boom, and I went to go work for MP3.com. MP3.com was a very unusual company. It flamed out, right? It was this massive IPO, and it flamed out rather spectacularly. But the interesting thing that a lot of people don't know is they really had groundbreaking technology.
Totally. I remember using it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, it's fantastic technology, right? So we had YouTube back in 1997, 1998, 1999. We had iTunes back then as well. And we had delivered this, we had created this unbelievable cloud of musical content. I mean, it was phenomenal what we could do. We had Web 2.0 way before Web 2.0 was even a thing, right? Dynamic publishing pages, just-in-time CD creation, our own internal ticketing system, continuous integration. These are buzzwords you hear about now, but nobody was talking about it in 1999. And so my experience there allowed me to actually really, one, we rode the .com boom, but then I was able to take everything that I learned there and then applied it for the next 10 years in all the companies I went to go work at. I was the director of quality control for them. And so then after MP3.com, I went to go work at DivX, and I did some firmware, white box testing. And then I went to go work at Website Story, which then ultimately was bought by Omniture and then Adobe, where I became their senior manager of worldwide quality for their web analytics, right? So then again, I learned a lot about web analytics and data collection and basically built, the SaaS space, right? So I became very grounded in software as a service and Web 2.0. And then from Website Story, I went and did some small startups and then ultimately landed at Avalara. And I was senior director of engineering at Avalara, where I managed a variety of their compliance solutions, right? So I learned a lot about, compliance, content delivery, and obviously, SaaS software being responsible for, pretty mission critical stuff. And I was with Avalara for about 6 years. Fantastic company. I was part of the senior leadership team there. And then after I left Avalara in 2016, and a friend of mine invited me to run an open source blockchain project. And it was there where I kind of fell into the blockchain rabbit hole. And this was mid 2017. So this is really when blockchain was red hot, right? With the ICO boom that was happening. And there was just a lot of excitement about building layer ones, and Ethereum was just taken off. So it was a really, really exciting time. And so, I became well known within this, open source blockchain project. And that's where I met a lot of the folks that ultimately wound up co-founding CasperLabs with me, right? So this project, unfortunately, experienced a critical governance failure and went belly up. But the investors in that project said, look, we really can't save this project, but we believe in some of the things this project was trying to do. Let's go ahead and let's create this new company called CasperLabs. And so that's how CasperLabs was founded. It was October 31st, 2018. I was with that other project for about, I'm going to say about a year, a little over a year, about 13 months.
Okay.
And they entrusted me to go ahead and, build the project, build the product, and build the development team. And we were very purpose-driven. When Renal and I sat down and laid out what CasperLabs is going to be, it was going to be an enterprise-focused blockchain, and we wanted to build a Red Hat consulting type business around the open source software. We believed very much in the Red Hat model. We believed that, Red Hat did great things for Linux at a time when businesses really didn't know how to adopt this open source technology. And we felt we see the exact same opportunity with blockchain.
Got you. Okay. So maybe before we get into CasperLabs, do you want to explain to people how, like, what blockchain is and how they can actually use it into the enterprise, and then why and how CasperLabs plays into that?
Yeah, let's do that. So let's bust some myths, right? So the first thing is that blockchain is not cryptocurrency. The two are very different,
Yep.
right? So cryptocurrency is an application of blockchain, right? So you can have blockchain without crypto, but you can't have crypto without blockchain. That's a great way to think about it.
Totally.
Blockchain, the way I like to think about blockchain is everybody's familiar with the internet, right? And I see the internet protocol, known as HTTP, as an information protocol.
Right.
It allows you to transmit information over a wide area network known as the internet. I see blockchain as a trust protocol. So any information you pass over a blockchain protocol can be trusted. And if you start thinking about the lack of trust people have on the information on the internet, the blockchain protocol is coming at just the time when consumers are demanding greater trust and transparency in the interactions they have over the internet, right? And that is what blockchain brings to bear. And you don't have to have crypto if you want to use blockchain. Businesses can use blockchain to secure and trust the data that they use in their business every day.
Got you. Okay. That's a great way of putting it. So how have you leveraged that ideology into CasperLabs, and how does a business actually use CasperLabs to do that?
Right. So, business is powered by software today, right? And there's like over 20 years, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? And so I take a very, very pragmatic approach when it comes to blockchain technology, which is quite different from a lot of the other public protocols you'll see out in the space, is that I see blockchain as a trust protocol that kind of fades into the background, right? I see it as a small part of a much larger application architecture that is there to support the workflows and data that businesses need by securing it through trust, right? And a certain amount of guarantees around what happened in history, right? So how does this apply, right? If you think about, let's take a very simple use case of pharma, right? When you want to bring a drug to market, I don't know if most people know this, but when you go through a clinical trial administrators spend almost double the amount of time validating their data than they do collecting it. And this is to ensure that the data isn't been tampered with, that it can be trusted, because there's a lot of liability and risks associated with that.
Right.
So just imagine if you could secure the data and you had some guarantees around who created the data, when the data was created, that the data hadn't been tampered with, that it was tamper-proof, that it was anonymized. How much time could you shave off the getting a drug to market, right?
Wow. Totally. That's huge, right? And very life-saving.
And very life-saving, right? So you could, and as consumers, you would get some guarantees around that clinical trial data, the conditions under which it was conducted, et cetera, because it's all in the immutable blockchain. So these are the kinds of, applications where trust plays a huge, huge role, right? And it's so much more than cryptocurrency, right? Cryptocurrency is like just the tip of the iceberg, right? I feel like that the real opportunity to transform society is by this trust and traceability features that blockchain brings to bear.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I agree with you. I think this is like the perfect time in history for that. And so how do I leverage CasperLabs in the enterprise, and maybe talk also about, because I think in a lot of cases you say open source, you say blockchain, you say kind of a few words, people get, or at least in enterprise, get so kind of like, we can't touch that. But a lot of companies are adopting both and actually in a lot of cases, it makes the most sense for them. So do you want to talk about how people in enterprise actually leverage CasperLabs technology?
Absolutely. So, one, open source, I don't think is anything to be afraid of, right? The open source software gives you transparency around what the protocol does and what the software does. And because there's many, many eyes on the source code itself, you can get some guarantees around what the systems are doing, right? Apache Apache web servers open source, Linux is open source, and we've seen massive adoption of both those technologies, right? And we believe blockchain is going to do the exact same thing. And how businesses can leverage blockchain is, a great example is, we've got a couple of prototypes actual production implementations now using Casper. One of them is IPWE that is building patents, right? They're building a patent marketplace.
Interesting.
Now, before IPWE, the buying and selling of patent and intellectual property was very difficult because these are more ephemeral things. There's no marketplace. And if you wanted to learn about a patent, you couldn't identify who owned it. Right. So when IPWE set down this path to create a patent marketplace, they discovered that almost 30% of the patents they were being sold in their marketplace were not, the person selling them didn't have the right to sell them. And so it became very, very obvious to them that they actually needed like a proof of custody, right? Or a provenance solution using public blockchain technology. And so they have gone live on the Casper protocol, and they will be publishing their customers will now be publishing their patents directly to the public protocol as a proof of ownership, right? And there are also, big, bold plans to actually integrate with the regional patent offices, that when a patent is actually approved, it gets published to the protocol with who the owner is. And so it is kind of like a public declaration of this is who owns the patent. And eventually we'll add legal findings. And so you will eventually be able to see the entire history of a piece of intellectual property when you buy it, right? And so, this is like a lot of value that can be built around making this public information much, much more accessible and available for buying and selling and tracking in terms of who owns it.
Interesting. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious then to talk about kind of, because the blockchain and everything is still pretty early on, what's your vision of where CasperLabs and doing blockchain and all these kind of new technologies in enterprise is going to go?
Right. So, I think a lot of the blockchain protocols kind of see like they're more anarchist, and they see, blockchain kind of coming in and upsetting the apple cart and decentralizing everything. And we like to think of it more as blockchain as an enabler for collaboration, right? Where companies that previously didn't trust each other because they competed can find a way and a set of economic incentives so that they can collaborate. And through collaborating, they can actually unlock greater potential for their entire industry, right? Which would help uplift the entire industry overall. There are many, many very interesting use cases around, like insurance. If you think about insurance, right? What if you had a way to share, death claim information? So you've got a family that's grieving and they have multiple life insurance policies. Let's say as an example, right? They may have 3 or 4 small insurance policies. How wonderful would it be that if they file a death benefit that is verified with one policyholder, with one company, that they then start sharing that death benefit information so they don't have to refile with multiple insurance companies, right? The other companies can share that information. Say, oh, you know what? We recognize this individual. We have a policy with them as well. Guess what? Now what we'll do is, because we're saving a little bit in terms of having to process that death benefit, we will split some kind of, finder's fee or something like that with the other company, because they have then an incentive to share. They make a little bit of money. The other company saves on, processing the claim. And what's the ultimate outcome? The family doesn't have to deal with multiple insurance companies for filing a death benefit claim, right? What a wonderful gift you can give that family, so they don't have to do this over and over and over again in a very difficult time, right? So getting these companies to collaborate is much, much more interesting to CasperLabs than saying, well, we just want to decentralize everything, right? And that's how we see, blockchain really playing a role in the enterprise, in that it's not about like moving all of their workflows to a blockchain-enabled workflow, but rather integrating blockchain into their existing workflows so that they can benefit from the decentralized ledger, right? And using the public protocol, right? Because the public protocol, a lot of companies are shy about using the public protocol, and there's still cases where they should use a private protocol because there may be sensitive information that they don't want to put on a public protocol. But we built a public protocol that will actually meet the needs of enterprise, right? That providing them, some centralized control, because we believe that in the future space, in the future world, that there will still be a space for centrally controlled businesses to operate, even in a more decentralized world, right? And we believe that they will operate by collaborating with people that they formerly competed with on certain specific initiatives to provide greater benefit and value to the consumer.
Sure. And I think actually you touched on it, and I think it's just, I want to reiterate it because I think it's so important, is you don't have to move your entire company to blockchain, right? And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that I've heard from companies. It sounds like you've kind of, you've heard that as well.
Yeah, we totally have heard that as well. I mean, my background is 20, 25 years in SaaS, right? And I built a protocol that I would use as an engineering director. Right. I was responsible for uptime of financial applications when I worked at Avalara, and I would never select a protocol that couldn't do certain things. Right. It had to integrate into my existing technology stack. I had to be able to staff it with the team that I had already in place. I would have had to be able to make changes to my software and upgrade my software. Right. And everything that the blockchain does as part of that larger application stack, it would have had to do as well. I have to be able to have control to access to certain applications and not others. So all of these requirements, right, are already baked into the Casper protocol. And that sets us apart from a lot of the other protocols there, is because we took a very business focus. I built a product that I would use, right, as the senior director of engineering in a large, now Fortune 500 company, right? So yeah, that's what's really different for us, is I don't think blockchain is the be all and end all. I think it has a very specific small space in the larger, infrastructure in an enterprise.
No, I agree with you. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I want to talk a little bit about how do developers actually get started, and maybe what skill sets should they have to actually start using CasperLabs and your technology?
The best way to get started is, you can visit casper.network, and there's a great developer guide there. We have tutorials, we have videos that will help them get started. And we also have fairly extensive support infrastructure, on our Discord as well, right? So CasperLabs, the company, is there to help developers get started on using the Casper network. And so there's lots of resources available there for them to get started. And in terms of skill set, the beautiful thing is a lot of these blockchains have very customizable workflows, because I'm going to get into the little technical weeds here, but there's a very specific, people know what Java is, right? So Java runs on your machine, and it has this own little container that it runs in, known as the JVM. And most of these blockchains have something similar, right? They have their own little virtual machines, if you will. And most of these specific, very special sauce virtual machines will have custom programming languages, or you have to run some really special hardware in order to run them. The Casper protocol doesn't do any of those things, right? So if you're used to running and working in your current workflow you use to build software today, Casper plugs right into that, right? So if you're a C++ developer, you can start working with Casper contracts in about 3.5 weeks, right? And you can do it on your own time. We recently had a Gitcoin hackathon. It was one of the largest hackathons Gitcoin has ever had. And we had 1,400 participants, and over half of them had never worked with blockchain before, right? Wow. And within 3 to 4 weeks, they were running contracts, right? Very cool. And so that's really the value proposition, is because it's a core requirement in a business. If you have to hire very specialized talent, then you run into a risk with maintaining that special talent, right? Totally. Recruiting them, hiring them, retaining them. So we made it very, very easy for, multiple people in the organization to become familiar with the technology and to be able to support it.
Smart. No, that makes a lot of sense, right? That was one other thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on, because you're right. Like, a lot of times it's like, well, we'd love to do this, but the technology to do that is not there, right? In this case, it is, which is awesome, right?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. It's about accessibility, right? So Casper and CasperLabs is about scalability. And when you talk about most of the protocols and they talk about scalability, they're only talking about how fast the protocol is, right? And while Casper is fast, its scalability for us is much, much more, right? It's about how the protocol scales across feature sets as your business grows. So as you're adding more features to your business, or as your business wants to integrate blockchain into a variety of different applications in your system, how can that protocol scale for your needs, right? Like, how flexible is it? And how many, all across the board, it's all about scaling adoption in terms of scaling throughput, but also even scaling across the feature set for enterprise.
No, that makes sense. And I think the one positive thing that I think came out of the pandemic, if anything, is the fact that I think more and more people are thinking globally now. And so I think having something that's put on the blockchain that can basically be replicated and secure as businesses and they onboard employees or open offices in different parts of the world where they maybe never considered before, a technology like blockchain and what you guys are doing at CasperLabs for enterprise really kind of fits into that. Or what's your thoughts around kind of expanding globally with blockchain and enterprise?
Well, so, CasperLabs has got making big inroads into the MENA region, right? So we've got offices in Dubai.
That's awesome.
Our developers themselves are global, right? We've got folks from, virtually every country in the world, right? So we've got a huge presence in Europe. We've obviously got folks in the United States. We have folks in India and Australia and in China. So we ourselves are a global company, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is amazing. And there's a lot of fruits to be born, right? For unbanking, banking the unbanked, right?
Yep.
So you talk a lot about people don't have banking infrastructure, but they do have mobile phones, right? So there's fantastic opportunities to give them access to financial products and financial instruments where they don't have it, right? So there's so much that the technology can do that is way beyond just the cryptocurrency piece of it.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious, what did you guys do, or how did Metacask use your platform? Because I think that's a really good real world example that I think maybe will help people really understand a really good example of how to use the blockchain.
So Metacask sells rare whiskey casks. And in some ways, it's very similar to IPWE, because here we have a marketplace that previously was laden with red tape and paper. There was very low level of access, right, to the artifacts that they wanted to create a marketplace around. And because there was low level of access, they didn't actually have very good market discovery around what the actual value of the asset was. And so by representing, so what is Metacask doing? They're representing these rare whiskey casks in the form of non-fungible tokens on the Casper protocol. And there's a couple of reasons why they selected Casper. One, obviously, is because Casper is much, much more affordable than Ethereum, right, at this point in time. And the second reason is the non-fungible tokens on Casper do support upgraded data or updated data, right? So the Casper protocol isn't fully immutable. And when we say fully immutable, a lot of these public protocols, once you write it to the blockchain, you can never change it.
Right.
But our perspective is that, yes, the history should be immutable, but the future is unwritten.
Right.
And so we allow Metacask to update certain details about the cask, right, about the NFT, as they receive new information about the whiskey cask. And that was a core requirement for them. And so by going onto the Casper protocol, this simplified their workflow and it made it a lot easier for them to actually provide updated information about the cask within the non-fungible token. And for those who don't know what a non-fungible token is, it's a one-of-a-kind thing, right? NFTs, there's a lot of excitement about it in the blockchain world. And my posit is that it's really exciting, not just for the digital art, but more so because NFTs are a great way to represent the world around us, right? Most of the world is represented as unique things that are not divisible, right? And are not necessarily tradable. And that's what a non-fungible token really is. It's something that cannot be divided, and you can't create many of it. It's a one-of-a-kind thing. And so, using this technology, Metacask is able to create a marketplace where, rare whiskey casks can be invested in, bought and sold and traded. And so it's very exciting. We're very excited, about bringing this to bear on the public protocol. And they also have on-chain auctions. So they've got an English auction and a Dutch auction, which is all running on the blockchain, right? And viewable by anybody that participates.
No, that's very cool. And I think the thing is too, it almost gets rid of like scalpers and fraud, right? In a lot of cases, by using something that's trackable. You can say like, yes, I bought this or I sold this, right?
Yeah, exactly. So once you own the NFT, it proves that you own the whiskey cask, right? And so that's something that cannot be, it can't be, what's the word I'm looking for? Counterfeited, right?
Yeah.
And NFTs have an interesting property. Like right now, ticket scalpers are able to resell tickets, but the original ticket issuer doesn't get any money of the scalp, right?
Right.
So if you were to put concert tickets on the blockchain, you can actually build something in that every time a ticket is resold, some percentage of the proceeds go back to the original issuer, right? So then this helps align incentives that, yeah, fine, I don't care if somebody resells the ticket, I'm still, a percentage of that money is still going to come back to me as the original issuer.
Sure. No, I think that's actually really good use case. And I actually think that's something that people can really understand and totally see value in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So I'm curious, you obviously have been very successful in tech and you're a CTO and founder of a company. And I think, how do we as a global community actually foster and have more females in tech? Never mind just trying to get them into C-suite, because I think if we get them into tech, a bunch of them will end up into C-suite roles, hopefully founders, and hopefully, doing whatever they want to do in tech, because I think there's a huge problem. I don't know if it's getting better. What are your thoughts around all that stuff?
Yeah, so I get asked this question a lot, and I dare say that I'm a little bit different than most of the people that you ask this question about. So
Awesome.
I absolutely support girls that code. I'm a huge fan of that, but I attribute my success in technology directly to my father. Right? If he had not put me in front of that personal computer when I was a young girl, I would not be in technology today. And so, ironically, if you look back to the 60s and 70s, the penetration of women both in mathematics and computer science was actually followed the population grid. It was 52%. 52% of all technologists at the time were women. And that really shifted, ironically, around the time that I actually got into computers in the 80s with the advent of the personal computer. And it was at this point in time where the PCs wound up more prevailing in front of the boys' desks.
Right.
Instead of the girls' desks. And so what happened then is boys wound up being the outliers. They wound up having a lot more exposure to technology than girls. And such, when they entered the workforce, right, either electrical engineering, they were way ahead of their female counterparts. And the female counterparts then became disenfranchised.
Right.
So I would say, if you have daughters, granddaughters, nieces, get them in front of a PC. Teach them how to write algorithms, teach them how to code, show them HTML, teach them how to do Minecraft mods, get them excited about technology, get them excited about computers. And my dad had to really push me. Like I wasn't excited about it, right? So they're not going to be excited about it. They won't be excited about it, but push them about it anyway, because this is the future, right? And technology is a fantastic career. And support them in their goals to learn about technology, so that when they get into computer science, they will be on par with their male counterparts. And so that's, for me, I feel like it's a generational thing, and it starts at home, right? That you teach. I drew my daughter into blockchain. I taught her she was a political science major. I taught her all about blockchain governance, because I felt like she needed to really understand blockchain technology, right? And our director of engineering, he has a young girl. He's teaching her how to code. She already knows how to code. She writes algorithms. So, because that's it, if you want to foster more women in technology, it starts at home, right? So put them in front of PCs. And I'll mentor any young lady that wants to be mentored in terms of how to how to deal with the C-suite or how to deal with being a female in technology, you can DM me on Twitter. I'm at Parlikar. So I'm always here to lend a hand.
No, I think that's awesome. But I'm curious then, what advice would you give to somebody that's maybe even in technology and female, or well, let's just say like as a white male, like a non-white male, because it's really easy for me to give advice on things when I maybe understand less than 1% of the stuff that I get because of like who I just was born as, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, in my entire career, I was the only female director of engineering, and many times the only female in engineering. And I would say, you know, it's one of the gender issues that women have is we more often than not, we do not trust in our own power. Sure. And so I would tell all the women out there, and this actually cross-cuts any vertical, right? Is that you have a lot more sovereignty than you think, and you have a lot more power than you give yourself. And so I would say speak up more often, disagree respectfully, don't be afraid to speak up. More often than not, when we think back later on, like, God, I wish I had said something. I wish I had done something. And more often than not, you have more power than you think you do, right? So speak up, find a fantastic mentor, find your power, help each other, right? Support each other. And I think that's what really counts.
No, I think that's actually really good advice. The other thing that I'd be curious to get your thoughts on, if you're that unhappy at what you're doing job-wise, I think there needs to be more, if the person wants to do this, is actually founding a business and company, right? And I find like sometimes that's also not really told to a lot of people. It's like, look, you're ready. You can do this. It's going to be hard, but like, I think not enough people hear that sometimes, or what are your thoughts around that?
Oh man, so this is a very interesting story that I'll share. So when I was approached to co-found CasperLabs, that was really kind of at a fork in the road, and I had to sit down. I sat down with my life partner, and I looked at him and I said, I really want to go do this. And it was definitely taking a risk because there were no guarantees that it would succeed. My co-founders had done. I had a great deal of confidence in my co-founders that it was going to work. But whenever you set out to found a business, it always comes with some inherent amount of risk. And it really was. And of course, he was very supportive. Obviously, I wouldn't be here if he wasn't. He's continued to support me. It's been amazing. But I would say that it was really more about me feeling like I could do it. And I allowed myself to have it. I think it was much, much more about that than it was about anything else. And it goes back to, your own power and your own sovereignty, and recognizing and allowing yourself to have your dream, to have your vision, to go do it. And if you allow yourself to have it and you believe in your own power, then it will happen, right? Things just happen. And I think that's exactly what's happened for me here.
No, I actually think that's really good advice, because the thing that's yes to all the stuff you just mentioned, but I think the other thing is like absolute worst case scenario, you can go back and get a job. And I know it's easy for me to say that, but like there has been no better point in history right now that like it seems like everybody in tech is hiring right now, and there's a shortage. And so if you want to do your own thing, and I'm not saying quit your job and start, you could do something as like a fun side project, see where it goes, and kind of evenings and weekends, and then decide if you want to do it. But I think there's no better time in history to actually start pursuing that, even if it's for a few hours a week and not going all in. Do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts around that?
No, 100%. And so I'll tell you something that's really unprecedented right now, like unprecedented in technology in the blockchain space, right? Okay. Is the fundraising, fundraising model, and the basically the creation of value and the creation of wealth in the blockchain space has never happened in history before, right? Like we've never had a new form of money. Yep. And so when you think about this, like CasperLabs alone has put aside 16% of all of our token supply towards developer incentives. And we have a developer DAO that will literally help you get started in building something on the decentralized protocol, right? So not only is there a fantastic opportunity to learn? There are so many incentives to actually bootstrap new and exciting businesses using blockchain technology, where you can actually go and get some funding to pay the bills, right? If you needed to, or to fund some educational content or participate in a community. So, which you've never seen before, right? Like in the dot-com boom, it was all venture capital funding, right? In the ICO boom and in this blockchain boom, it's all happening via tokenization. Yep. And it's kind of unbelievable. It's incredible, actually. So there's tremendous opportunity for people to, create their own businesses using blockchain technology. It really is a greenfield right now.
Sure. And you don't need a ton of money. You could start with hundreds, maybe a few $1,000s, not even tens of thousands of dollars. So it's so attainable these days, especially if you start kind of small. You don't need a team of 100 people. It's like you start, or maybe you find a co-founder, or there's ways to do it that you don't have to be, we need to raise $1 million. It's like, do you? You probably don't.
No, I mean, when we founded CasperLabs, it was myself and 5 other developers, right? When we founded it, and then 5 other co-founders, right? So it was a very small team, right? We started with a very small team, and we went from there.
Interesting. So I'm curious, you mentioned throughout the show, you've been in the tech space for a really long time. What other things did you maybe wish you knew when you were younger, and you would tell people that are trying to, be successful or build their own business?
What are the things I wish I knew? Do your research.
Okay.
Right? Like, do your research, follow your instinct and intuition, right? Talk to your customers. Do your research and talk to your customers. Customers' feedback is so, so important, right? And I wish I had read the Startup Owner's Manual, right? Like earlier in my life, right? If you want to be an entrepreneur, read the Startup Owner's Manual. Starting a business, it doesn't really matter what kind of business it is. It's written for a technology business, but I think it crosses all lines of business. It gives you a great guidebook in terms of how to build a business. And, customers are, funnily enough, and even, customers are willing to give you feedback. I've been approached by startups, product managers, say, hey, will you take a look at my product? It'll be 15 minutes of your time. And I didn't even need any kind of incentive to do it. I was happy to do it, right? And and getting that feedback is massively valuable in terms of helping you build a product and figuring out whether there's actually a market for the solution or idea that you have.
No, I think that's really good advice. The one thing I'm curious to get your thoughts on is, obviously you guys at CasperLabs have a roadmap, and with the example you gave a few minutes ago, they requested being able to add additional data to that blockchain. So how do you manage customer feature requests while maintaining your kind of roadmap, or is it adjusting, or how do you manage that? Because I think that can be really challenging, especially early on in a startup.
Yeah, so it's more of an art than a science, I would say.
Sure.
This is definitely the technology product management discipline. So the way you look at it is one of the lenses I look at these kinds of feature requests through is like, is it general purpose, and will it support the requirements of many customers in the future, right?
Right.
One of the things I've learned in terms of working with customers is oftentimes customers, and it's going to kind of fly in the face of what I said before, customers don't really know what they want. And so having, you have to present a vision to them of how you could reshape a current workflow, right? And most entrepreneurs are visionaries, right? They see a future state for their customer that their customer cannot possibly imagine, right?
Totally. Yeah.
And a great example is like when I talked about IPWE. If you had gone to any one of those customers and said, "Hey, what do you think about bundling your patents with somebody?" And you talk to any of their IP lawyers, they'd be like, "Oh, that's a crazy idea. Why would I bundle my patents?" Right? But Eric over at IPWE is like, no. Like, just imagine if you could bundle this together and you could split all. He is that visionary, right? He sees that, right? And so a lot of times customers don't know what they want. So you have to be able to imagine that future world for them, and then test that idea with them and get them excited about it.
No, I think that's actually really good advice, but we're kind of coming to the end of the show. So how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about Casper Labs and any other links you want to mention?
Oh, absolutely. So if you want to learn about the public network and start getting in and getting your hands dirty with it, go to casper.network. If you're an enterprise or a company and you're interested in adopting blockchain in your business, check us out at CasperLabs.io. That's our website, and you'll be able to get more information there and reach out to us. And if you're somebody that is interested in technology, if you're a girl that likes to code, you can follow me at M Parlikar at Twitter.
Very cool. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.